All right, guys, we're going to be going over UFC 329, Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway. Now, before I go into that, I want to go ahead and go over a couple other things as well. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to go over my predictions about Max Holloway, early predictions, obviously, about Max Holloway versus Conor McGregor, and the fact that he's coming back into the spill, into the limelight regarding the entire UFC thing. And in fact, just recently he actually put out some training footage, and he even did a little tweet suggesting he was really grateful for all the fans and stuff like that, motivating him to come back and stuff. And he just posted this a few days ago, so let's go ahead and take a quick look.
Good job, Clea. No.
So yeah, it's been pretty cool. With all of that being said, though, I'm really excited for this matchup, Max Holloway versus Conor McGregor. And Conor McGregor is the one who brought me into the sport, so I don't know why I keep forgetting his name for a second there. But in the same breath, I just want to share, this is exciting for me. I'm excited for this entire thing. By the way, if you haven't subscribed already, we have just hit the 100 subscriber list. And in fact, my Twitter handle is just right there. So you can go ahead and, click on that. Or not click on that, but go ahead and search up that on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and you can find me there. Now, what I want to do is I want to quickly go over a couple things in regards to, Brendan Allen was a very interesting, unique fighter to me, and I was really excited to see him, especially in his next upcoming fight against Edmund Shabazian. But he tends to do these things that I just don't see. I don't know. I just want to be a fan of him, but it's like he almost makes me not want to be a fan of his. He almost ends up ruining what my perspective on him really is, and the way I look at him as well. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because he recently went on the MMA Junkie podcast and said a few things about the Khamzat Chimaev fight. And the thing is, the glazing from the Jackson podcast has been really, really disturbing to watch, especially with Clear Roundtree, the way he's just coped with the entire thing. Bear Judio, really bad. Really bad. It makes him look really biased. And the sad thing about this, and even Wyatt at Fight Society had actually shared this as well, is that a lot of these people are becoming these fighters and people who are high level in these, quote unquote, UFC, MMA industry, who are supposed to be our experts and stuff like that, are coming off very biased, right? To say the least. And ironically, Brendan Allen had actually called out Khamzat Chimaev prior to this, and suggested they could have a fight together, and all of a sudden became his training partner, essentially gets smashed by him most of the time, and now is just glazing him completely. So watch this.
I think we're in a crazy position, and everyone's just waiting for the bosses to say what avenue they're going to go, I'm kind of caught, I think Khamzat deserves a rematch. I think it was a super close fight, based on statistics. I had him win the fight, but I could also be partial. I'm very honest to say I could be partial.
He is very
but obviously
partial.
It was still a close fight because it was a split decision. So
It wasn't a close fight.
I would say he should get a rematch, but
No, he shouldn't.
I also think Nasruddin has earned number one contender. So it's a tough, super tough spot. I think if it was me, obviously, but that's way out of my pay grade. I think that you give Khamzat the rematch, depending on timeline of both of them being ready. I think Khamzat's already ready. I think it's up to Sean at this point. And then you make Nasruddin, unless he wants to wait, which I don't know why he'd want to wait that long, because who knows, they might not fight till October, which means he may not fight till next year. So that's a 2-year layoff. You make Nasruddin versus me if I win, that'd be freaking phenomenal. I don't know what the thing is.
Just for context, they've actually fought already. It wasn't a very enjoyable or exciting fight altogether. In the same breath as well, I do believe if Sean Strickland were to have the rematch with Khamzat Chimaev, I don't think it would go the same way it went previously. Now, before you suggest that, Khamzat would slime him out, I don't think that's the case. I think what happened is, if you look at Strickland for a bit, you can see that the confidence and Dean Thomas talks about this a lot, specifically more around UFC, the UFC event coming up with Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev. I think it was UFC 328. I don't butcher that. But UFC 328, Dean Thomas was talking a lot about this. And he was talking about the confidence that you can see and the self doubt you can see when Sean Strickland is fighting and how he's almost fighting his mind. And I have that experience personally in my life as well. So I can see how that would play on him. And that being said, like, I think if Sean Strickland does have the rematch, and a lot of you might disagree with me, but if Sean Strickland does have the rematch with Khamzat Chimaev, I think he's going to come in more confident and he's going to open up a lot more. Now, that could obviously be used against him as well. So it does matter. In the same breath, I could see that happening. And I can see Sean Strickland like outclassing Khamzat Chimaev in the second rematch. The reason why I don't think Khamzat Chimaev should really earn the rematch is because he hasn't really defended the title. Yeah, he won the title, but he's had these issues with COVID. That was a whole situation with his recent like hiccups with the entire weight cut and all that stuff. So he's had these issues happen already. And because of that, it seems like they're ongoing, if I'm being honest with you. Like, listening to what people are saying about specifically his weight cut and the way it went down and how he lost a bunch of oxygen and stuff like that during that entire time. And so he had to be out for an entire hour and just completely stop. Like, to me, what that sounds like is COVID symptoms, that whatever he had before back in 2020, 2021, those are still playing on him. And that might be also a part of why his cardio is kind of weak as well. Although I do believe he showed up really well in this fight, in this previous fight with Sean Strickland. However, I still have it like 3 rounds to Sean Strickland. You know, round 2, 3, and number 5. If you look at the strikes and the intensity behind the strikes and the jabs, a lot of those go to Sean Strickland. The Weasel actually breaks this down as well, which is, I rewatched the fight. I watched the Weasel's breakdown of this as well, and you can see it's clearly for Sean Strickland. So there's no bias here about like it being for Khamzat Chimaev. Honestly, if Khamzat Chimaev did a decent job, especially in round 3 coming back from round 2. And I think he just blew his wad in round 1. I think he also, personally, I think Sean Strickland's like mental warfare game is why Khamzat Chimaev came into the fight trying to mitigate that immediately and just squash the beef before the fight happened. And I think even though Strickland says, oh, it was like a play or whatever the case is, or, you know, we created the beef or whatever, it's not necessarily created. They actually felt the way they felt, and they were actually pretty upset. What I think really happened genuinely is that Khamzat Chimaev got Sean Strickland in his head a little bit. When you watch the press conference and you watch like some of the stuff, Khamzat was acting a lot out of character compared to how he was acting when he won the belt, before he won the belt, and all that. He kind of changed his demeanor to be more calm, to be more cool, calm, collected, to be more composed. And then he started acting way more out of character. I mean, a lot of people didn't really expect him to go how crazy he went during that press conference. So to me, that tells me that Strickland got in his head. However, Strickland got in his own head as well. I think you can kind of see that when you're watching the press conference itself. You can kind of see Strickland's kind of like getting agitated, getting irritated, getting a little bit defensive at times as well. But it all worked out in his favor. And I think he really mentally broke him down, honestly. Now, a lot of people might disagree with me on this particular take, but you guys let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on this, because did Sean Strickland really break him down mentally or not? Like, that's what I want to know. And I want to hear what you guys' take is on this. Now, let's see if there's anything else that Brendan Allen has to share with us here regarding the matchup.
Is with Drikus, but since he want to sit out and wait, let him sit out and wait longer if he wants to. Let him fight Usman if he wants to fight him. Do whatever with him, and then you have Kaio. Let Kaio fight Drikus or something. You know, there's many matchups to be made. It's just what are they gonna do? You know, what are they gonna do?
So what's interesting here is Drikus du Plessis already has a matchup, I believe, with Kamara Usman. Now, I don't know if that's official yet or not, and I might just be sharing that a little bit prematurely. But from my understanding, and let me just double check if I have this in my bookmarks on X, because from my understanding, you know, that fight is pretty much a done deal, more or less, between Usman and DDP. So we have Upfront MMA here. I'm going to share this with you guys right now. Up from MMA here, it said breaking news: DDP returns. The rumored fight with Kamara Usman has been signed. Date and venue to be announced. Slick Fight UFC, and I think they already announced a date, if I'm not mistaken, on this as well. However, the search in this stupid X that Elon runs is really fudging difficult to figure out. I think they said July something. So let's just double check real quick somewhere else. Yeah, so it says here July 2026. It's already headlined. It's gonna be headlining in Oklahoma City, UFC Fight Night. At the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City, basically at 185. So yeah, they're saying this is the battle for Africa too, which is ironic. All right. Well, anyways, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now I want to go into a little bit something else, a different territory. A lot of us are talking and hearing about the MVP fight card, the UFC. We just got word that Scott Coker might be joining the MMA world again, or rejoining the MMA world again. Ironically, he's 63 years old, so I'm just like, whoa, okay. So in this next clip, I actually shared in one of my videos recently that I think it was one of my shorts. I shared it. Basically, I was saying, hey, oh no, it was a long video about Colby Covington. If you haven't watched that video already, go ahead and watch it. But with that video on Colby Covington, I did mention that in the PFL, if the PFL and the MVP were to merge together, it would be really good for them. Why I say that is because the PFL has the roster, the MVP has the marketing side of things, which is why I thought Jake Paul actually joined the PFL in the first place. He did one promo video around the upcoming fights and stuff like that, and then never did anything after that. So I don't know what happened really there, and I don't know if they're still on good terms or whatever the case is. In the same breath as well, if you look at it, I mean, it just makes the most sense, right? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this is the case, but I believe that MVP actually put out a statement recently suggesting that they're going to be doing something like that. So they said they're going to basically be doing, they're going to basically borrow fighters from different organizations. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So these promotions would be places like KSW, One Championship, just things like that. So yeah. By the way, I wonder what a lot of you guys think about the MVP promotion, because I'm trying to find it right now here on X, and it's just so difficult to find the way their search engine is or works. I don't know why it's so difficult to figure this out, but I can't seem to figure it out or find it. I'm just looking for the most valuable promotions actual page. Let's see. Okay, I found it. So let's see their recent yeah, so they're actually posting about this other upcoming fight that they have with Holly Holm, Stephanie Han, all that stuff. So regardless of that, I'm gonna go ahead and just play this video real quick where I forgot his name. I know, yeah, he basically says what I said.
Absolutely. Let me I gave a little breakdown though too, but somebody Lazy Bet MMA just said part of this of a fight card that kind of I had heard they were kind of working with PFL potentially of doing something, some cross promotion, which would be great. But let's go ahead and chat with this a little bit. So here it is right here. He says, Lazy Bet MMA says, I've also heard some pretty strong rumblings that there's cross promotion in the works between the MVP and PFL, which would be smart. Saladin Parnasse versus Paul Hughes. Hell yes.
Look, first of all, just that fight alone, hell yes. Saladin Parnasse, I'm so glad he got this stage, right? Because I feel like that's been one of those guys that if you know, you know. Like the hardcores have been like, bro, this is somebody you need to pay attention to. That finally the casuals or the more common are getting to see a little bit of this guy because he is talent. And I love that fight with Paul Hughes. But this idea of working with the PFL, I absolutely love. And it makes all the sense in the world, right? Okay, what is MVP's MMA's problem, right? Like they said it. Nikisa and Jake Paul the whole week, they said, man, we are great at getting people to look at stuff, to disrupt, to make a name, to market. That's what we're great at. But we're sitting here.
Yeah, honestly, they're great at, like Luke Thomas said, selling really shit fights. They're so good at marketing that they marketed us a very shitty fight card that was extremely one-sided.
Saying, Josh, the problem is they don't have fighters. Okay, what's the PFL's challenge? Well, the PFL has fighters. The problem is they're not great at promoting and getting people on board and getting eyeballs. Even John Martin has said, man, I think we have great fights. The problem is we don't have enough people knowing about them. So you take one entity that has fighters, you take one entity that gets attention, they're both missing the other. Boom, it's a natural partnership. Now, here's the only thing that scares me about this. I think it's a foregone conclusion that PFL is off of ESPN after this year, right? It doesn't seem like that partnership is going to be renewed. Maybe something will come through in the 12th hour and we'll be surprised, but it doesn't seem like that's coming back. All right, you see,
It's done.
that's how it's done, right? They're done. So here's the only.
Yeah, just to clarify real quick. So I tried to go on the website for the ESPN app. I have the subscription for a year. Now, I can watch the prelims, and even then, finding those prelims is super difficult to find. However, if I go and try and find the main card, it wants me to connect to a TV provider, and I just don't understand why that is. And I don't understand why they make it so difficult and so, like, it's tremendously difficult to find. It's almost infuriating because as a mixed martial arts fan, here's the thing, like, I know, like, all of us fans love the UFC, or big fans of the UFC, and I'm not trying to, like, not glaze the UFC, so to speak, but in the same breath, it's just like they've outpriced the regular fans so much. Like, I love going to UFC events. I've been to probably 4 or 5 of those events so far, and every time I go, it's like I have to really, really think about what am I gonna do exactly to be able to, like, get the ticket. Now I'm looking at tickets for PFL, who's coming to Austin, Texas in June or July or something like that. It's Castello Vents Johnny Eblin. Sorry, I can't fucking remember this guy's name for the life of me. That being said, those tickets are like $164 for the ground seats, which is incredible compared to, obviously the UFC itself. Now, obviously the UFC has way better fights, more or less, but the competition in PFL hasn't been that bad, to be honest with you guys. Like, when you watch their fights, it's almost like watching the UFC, and sometimes it can be better, sometimes it could be worse. It could be boring. My biggest issue with the PFL at the beginning, or when I used to watch it prior to the new guy who has it, John Martin, my issue with them was the pacing. And now they figured out the pacing itself. Like, I saw the MVP fight card had a lot of issues with the pacing itself. So that being said, I just think that PFL has a lot of potential. Now, obviously, we have news that Scott Coker, who used to run Strikeforce, who used to run Bellator, is planning to come back into the MMA game. And now that's gonna be really. We're gonna have the PFL, we're gonna have the UFC, we're gonna have Scott Coker's promotion, and then we're gonna have MVP. So we're gonna have 4 major players in this economy, or in this market, so to speak, which is gonna be, in my opinion, great for us because it's gonna bring us a bunch of things to talk about and talking points and stuff like that. And at the same time, we get to the fighters get to have more options and stuff like that as well. Like, what was really difficult to see was when Bellator got, taken by the PFL, and the way the previous guy, who I forgot his name now, but the way the previous guy, did it, like, it was really sad to see, like, a lot of those fighters actually ended up, like, resign, or, like, just quitting, or, like, stepping away from MMA, so to speak. And they also not just stepped away from MMA, but a lot of them just retired. And a lot of them just couldn't find fights. And then you see people like Aaron Pico, right, who just joined the UFC. Patricio Pitbull, who joined the UFC as well. But like now they're so aged out, it's almost kind of weird. I mean, Aaron Pico's still good, but then you had that, what was his name? The one who was talking quite big as well, right, in the bantamweight division. I can't remember even his name at this point, which is kind of sad, right? Then you had then you have some other guys that are from the PFL Tour era. So yeah, Amasov, whatever his name is, Amaslayev. He, I think, is our biggest hope right now to possibly become a champion. Apart from that, like, who knows, right? So yeah, I just want to quickly finish this up and then we can go from there.
This is the only problem I see. So wherever PFL goes, and again, this could be just a short-term partnership, but I like the idea of them working together long-term. It just becomes an issue with, let's say PFL goes and signs somewhere else, and they've got this broadcast platform, and they do all their events, except for 4 times a year, they give a handful of their fighters away to MVP to put it on Netflix. Then whoever came in and paid you that money for your product is going to be like, wait. Why when you get the big fights, you take them away and you put them over on Netflix? Now, maybe there's a way to work together and make that all work, but that'll be the challenge. So there's challenges. It's not a slam dunk, easy to figure out thing, but I love the idea of those two organizations working together.
Well, because if they're going to have more events, you allow your fighters to go fight on Netflix and build a name and they become stars, right? And then they come back to, let's just say, Fox Nation. Okay, they come back to Fox Nation and they headline or they co-main event some fights because they were already on Netflix, and now they've got a big enough following that people will actually tune in and pay attention on Fox Nation and subscribe to them for $2.99 or $4.99 or whatever it is they decide to up their fee after they do take over PFL. That being said, I think it's a brilliant idea.
That's the sell, right?
So yeah, I hear what he's saying on that part. Now I think we should go ahead and listen to Nikisa Bedarian on this specifically this entire UFC thing. Now, this is Nikisa Bedarian doing an interview with MVP, Ariel Helwani, about MVP and the future of MVP. I think it's very fascinating to listen to what he has to say. I'm going to pause it in between here and there, not too much to be honest with you, just to kind of point out a few things he's sharing.
On average, around the world tuned in live on Netflix. The viewership peaked at almost 17 million during the main event. In the US alone, 9.3 million viewers on average, peaking at 11.6 million viewers during the main event. Your reaction when you got the news of these numbers?
Delighted, particularly with the averages, right? To average over 9 million viewers in the US alone for the triple main event is pretty remarkable. You know, going into it, both Jake and I were kind of landing on 20 million as peak viewership. So we got close. We didn't quite hit it, but it was the first time that we're doing this on Netflix in a space where there's a clear number one brand in UFC, right? When you have these big events in boxing, it's never brand driven, it's fighter driven. Here we came into a sport where there's an NFL within that sport, and that's the UFC. And we were able to perform as well, if not better than anything they've ever done on US television. And that is very satisfying.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with him there. They did perform really well. I liked the overall production of it as well. I just thought it was like the things surrounding the fight card were really good in terms of production value. Pacing was, really bad after the main card started. But the fights themselves just were really one-sided, like extremely one-sided, and you could see that. Now, here's the thing. Everybody's trying to sell us a narrative, right? The UFC wants to sell us a narrative. The MVP wants to sell us a narrative. PFL, I don't feel like is necessarily trying to sell us a narrative. They're just trying to see if they can get more traction. That's all it is. What John Martin is doing at the PFL, I really do like, personally. And I already think he's tremendously improved the product itself. Let's go back to Nikisa.
The case to be made, if the main event goes into the second round, you very well could have hit that 20 million number. What was your reaction when you saw it last just 17 seconds?
Ronda's back, right? Like the fact that people are speaking about, oh, that must have been fixed. How did that happen? One, you definitely don't know the history of Ronda Rousey. Two, if you're going to fix something, you certainly wouldn't do it to last 17 seconds. And three, it just speaks to the beauty of the sport and the unexpected. Of course, ourselves and Netflix would have liked the fights to last a little bit longer at that point. That only builds viewership. But that's the, that's the unexpected nature of anything that can happen within MMA. And that's a wonderful thing. And that's what keeps fans on the edge of their seats.
So here's the issue with this, what he's saying. This to me is like complete bullshit. When I was watching when I was doing the live stream on this channel and watching the fights with Colin, and we get to the main event, and the main event, happens the way it happens, Colin's just like in awe and like completely shocked. And I'm just there and I'm like, yeah, it's exactly what I expected to happen. Now, I know I chose for Gina Carano to win, but that's because I think I just wanted to see her win. I honestly wanted to see her have a little bit more time to do the striking. But if you go to, Tapology, and you go and look at her fights, specifically referring to Ronda Rousey, you can see she's got multiple submissions under even a minute, like 30 seconds, that she's just got in, done the armbar, and got out. And now, if you're trying to optimize your time, and you're doing, quote unquote, prize fighting, as Chael Sonnen calls it, which is taking the easiest fight for the most amount of top dollar, basically, and most amount of money, right? You are going to be going to do this fight. You're going to be picking Gina Carano. You're not going to be trying to challenge yourself. Like, a lot of people are complaining, like, oh, why didn't she pick Holly Holmes? Why didn't she pick Larissa Pacheco? Why didn't she pick someone like Kayla Harrison or Amanda Nunes? Like, why didn't she pick any of these ladies? And I think she's salty about Hunter Campbell, because I think Hunter Campbell suggested to Ronda Rousey that why don't you fight Kayla Harrison, because there's a narrative behind that, or Amanda Nunes, or one of those top fighters. And I genuinely believe, and I could be completely wrong about this, by the way, but I genuinely believe that Ronda Rousey didn't want to challenge herself and didn't want to take a fight for, theoretically less money for a harder challenge, so to speak. So, basically the way, like, Dana White said, Francis Ngannou's not here for, like, tough fights in the UFC, which is not true, by the way. Well, kind of. But, hindsight, kind of true. But that's a different topic for another, well, actually, we could talk about that later. But to get back to the point, with Ronda Rousey, like, that's exactly what she did. She wanted to take the easiest fight she can get, someone who hasn't trained for the past 17 years, whose basically entire goal is to lose 100 pounds to get to the fight. Now, I love Gina Carano. I think she's awesome. But I'm like, it was infuriating to watch them at the end of the match just like glaze each other. Even those press conferences and even the face-to-face, they're just glazing each other the entire fucking time. And it almost came off a little bit cringe and a little weird, okay? Like, I get it. You guys want to, like, say, we changed the world. Like, bro, how the fuck did you change the world? First of all, you guys didn't change the world. You guys didn't change anything. You changed your pockets, okay? Like, let's not try to lie to anybody here. Don't think that we're fucking stupid like John Jones thinks we are. I'll get to that in a second as well. But, like, what the fuck are they, like, the whole press conferences that they had, press conference 1 was okay, right? She got a little crazy. She had a couple bars, Ronda Rousey, and it was great. Press conference 2, same narrative. Press conference 3, same narrative. It was just fucking, like, at that point, I was so exhausted with listening to it. In fact, that's part of the reason why I couldn't do content for a little bit, because I was like, that wasn't the whole reason, but, like, the reason I haven't done content for a minute was just because I was like, how do I make sense of this whole thing, and how do I deliver it in such a way where I can share it with the audience correctly? Because I don't want to be, like, so emotional about the entire situation that, like, what I'm saying doesn't get across or done properly or, like, shared properly. And I think I speak for a lot of fans when I say this, but, like, if Ronda Rousey just sat there and said nothing, I would be completely happy with that. Like, I'd rather she just shut the fuck up instead of talking about all this bullshit about how it's us against the UFC, blah, 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 blah. It ain't for you. You're literally in this to make your money, make your little bag, have your kids, which is not a bad thing, but, like, make your bag, have your kids. It was basically a money grab or daylight robbery, so to speak, on all of us. I think the other thing too is your first impression is always your last impression. Like, this is something that I always thought about as well. And I think with the MVP, right, fight card, the way it went, they have to be able to sustain that curiosity, that people wanting to watch those fights. And I think in order for them to do that, those fights have to be somewhat competitive. Like, if you watched the MVP fight card, and all of a sudden you see Juan Diaz and Dooho Choi, or was it Juan Diaz? No, Santos. Sorry, Santos and Dooho Choi fighting it out. I mean, Colin and I were going back and forth. Colin saying, Santos is gonna knock him out, and I'm like, bro, Dooho Choi is a veteran. This guy's gonna blow his entire wad in for round one, and then not have the gas tank to continue the fight into round two and round three, and that's exactly what happened. And then in round two, I think Dooho Choi ends up getting a submission or a knockout or something like that. But like, you have to be able to watch these fights and see that they're like really competitive. That was a really fun fight to watch. And the issue with a lot of the MVP fight card fights was that they were so one-sided that even though they were slightly competitive, there was like two fights that were slightly competitive in first round, they didn't end up going the distance, and so, or like being competitive enough to go past the first round.
Saw a clip from someone who I respect very much, veteran of the broadcast game, Jim Rome, use words like circus, spectacle, you played everyone, talking about Gina and Ronda in particular, work the system. I'm wondering if you saw that clip in particular and other chatter like that where it seemed like people were very upset with how that fight played out.
I didn't, but I guess, Conor McGregor worked the system when he beat Jose Aldo as quickly as he did, or Ronda Rousey, when her 3 other finishes under 35 seconds, worked the system. Or when a fighter comes out and knocks someone out in boxing in one round, I guess they work the system. It just speaks to a lack of understanding of the sport. Similar to, I think I saw some blurb about Mark Shapiro saying,
the fighters he's talking about, those are competitive fights, first of all, to just share, just to be clear, right? Those are competitive matchups. Those matchups were like, they didn't game the fucking system. Like, Ronda Rousey gamed the fucking system, right? MVP needed to be able to like put on a show with the headliner being, the headliner. I honestly think they did the wrong headliner. The co-main event, I think, should have been to the top. I think they should have done Mike Perry, Nate Diaz at the very top, because they did it in LA as well. And I think they should have had Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano at the bottom, below that. And then I think they should have put Francis Ngannou in the prelims, to be honest. Like, or put him against Robles to Spain. But that's just my personal opinion. If you haven't watched already some of my old videos and you're not familiar with my content, I am not a Francis Ngannou fan at all. I'm not going to deny that he does a really good job at fighting, but he didn't look that great in this particular fight, in my opinion. And on top of that, he already had like an extra 30, 40 pounds on top of his opponent. And on top of that as well, I think there was a bit of rig rust. But I just, on top of that, I just think he is, as a character, very selfish, not very, I mean, I don't want to go into this right now because I want to bring this up later, but the whole John Jones debacle and Francis Ngannou, like, why the fuck are we even talking about that? Why is anyone entertaining the idea of John Jones fighting Francis Ngannou? Well, first of all, no one gives a fuck about that fight. Second of all, it's never happening. Like, it's just never fucking happening. The UFC is never going to let, well, I shouldn't say never, but most likely the UFC is not going to let John Jones out of his contract, especially the way they spoke about it. And Tyrone Woodley, oh, what a fucking dumbass. Like, what an idiot. Why would you say on the broadcast, like, hey, maybe the MVP could, like, pay your lawyers to get you out of that contract? Like, say that off the fucking broadcast, you dumb shit. Jesus Christ. Some of these people, man. Okay, let's go into the Mark Shapiro thing.
But yeah, not good for the sport. We knew it within the last 20 seconds. The entire UFC Ronda Rousey train was built on quick finishes, right? She was the biggest pay-per-view star in the sport based on quick finishes. UFC offered her a certain amount of money to do the fight. It just wasn't enough. They didn't want to hit the margin profile. But to come out and say bad for the sport, what's bad for the sport is not paying the fighters. What's bad for the sport is not paying attention enough to give Conor McGregor his due moment after 5 years of not being in the cage, in the octagon, and you announce him on an Instagram live. That's bad for the sport, not what we did. What we did is tremendous for the sport.
Were you surprised?
So I want to go back into that a little bit more because I like what he said about Conor McGregor not getting his shine properly and the announcement done properly. I mean, I personally would have loved if they had done like a really cool video, like promotion about like McGregor re-entering the UFC, coming back to Max Holloway, who he already defeated earlier in the career, and didn't do the striking, did the wrestling, like the whole narrative behind that thing. Talking about 170 versus like 145 or 155. and all that stuff. And I'm going to go into that fight a little bit, like I said earlier. So if you're in here for that, just bear with me. I'm going to go back and break down what he said about the Mark Shapiro thing, okay?
Hey, bad for the sport,
Okay, I think I have to go back a little further.
right? She was the biggest pay-per-view star in the sport based on quick finishes.
So she was the biggest. What he said is true. Okay, especially during that era and during that time, it was all about her having these quick finishes. She was the biggest pay-per-view draw because of that. So that's true.
UFC offered her a certain amount of money to do the fight. It just wasn't enough.
Okay, again, I don't think that's truly the case. I think the competition that was offered to Ronda Rousey, and no one's talking about this, by the way. Like, this is the only stuff that you'll get from my channel. But no one's talking about how there's a possibility that there was competition that she didn't want to entertain. And maybe it was the same amount of money or less, and she just said no, right? Now, to be fair, if it was less, then it would make sense why she said no. But in the same breath, it's just like she doesn't want to challenge herself.
Didn't want to hit the margin profile. But to come out and say bad for the sport.
And the thing is, like, she did this with the intention to go do a money grab. She came in, said, and she's so bitter, dude. Like, I don't know, her personality, she's just so bitter. She seems a little bit malicious, if I'm being honest, the way she talks and stuff like that. She seems like how, who was the fighter who just talked about it recently? Actually, he's going to bring it up. Nikista's going to bring it up. But one of the fighters basically said she needs therapy, and I completely agree.
What's bad for the sport is not paying the fighters. What's bad for the sport is not paying attention enough to give Conor McGregor his due.
Yeah, so he said what's bad for the sport is not paying the fighters. Now, I do agree with him on that, but there is a monopoly, right? And obviously, him being a former employee, like, here's my issue with Nikisa Badarian, and here's my issue with Jake Paul. As much as I like how they are so good at marketing, they, in the same breath, they reframe things so much that, like, obviously it's empowering to them, but it's just not true, right? Objectively. So that's the difficulty I have with these guys. And sometimes they say things that are inaccurate or just plain out not true. And at the same time, it's like they want to shove it down our throats. Like, see, here's the thing. These guys are going to do really well with the casual audience. But with the main hardcore audience, these guys will not do well unless they get the right talent.
Moment after 5 years of not being in the cage, in the octagon, and you announce them on an Instagram live. That's bad for the sport. Not what we did. What we did is tremendous for the sport.
Were you surprised when you heard his comments and the way he painted it? We've heard the backstory from Ronda, from you, from a lot of other people involved. And he essentially said, we weren't interested. We had a chat about it and we passed because we didn't think that this was the best representation of the sport. We're in the weekly MMA business, and I'm paraphrasing, but that's the general sentiment. Were you surprised that he positioned it that way?
No, I mean, he's talking to an audience that's not sophisticated when it comes to the fight game, and he's selling a narrative for his investors because he's worried about the stock price, which he has share ownership in. So that doesn't surprise me.
That's an interesting take he has there, and I don't know if I can disagree or agree with him on that. What I would say is that in terms of the audience itself, right, the actual MMA fans, I think there was a narrative earlier this year about the MMA landscape just not being fun, not enjoyable, the UFC just completely, like, fumbling the bag, so to speak, right, with all the stuff that has been happening recently in the UFC. And so I think what these guys are trying to do is just, like, for example, Scott Coker, Nikisa Badarian, and Jake Paul, John Martin. I think they're all trying to capitalize on the idea that the sentiment overall for the UFC is that everybody's pretty pissed off. And that being said, this is why I don't understand the UFC in certain ways. Like, if you have all these competition people coming in, which it doesn't sound like they're really concerned about or want to up-level their game based off of that, but I would make a better promo for Conor McGregor coming out.
I think in some ways it's expected. I would also say we are not in competition with the UFC. That was our first event. Judge us versus Zuffa 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Judge us versus UFC 30 in Atlantic City, which was the first event that Dana White oversaw as, the president of the UFC. We're 4.5 years in. That was our first MMA event. Tell me another organization who's entered a sport with a strong existing player and delivered what we did with Netflix and the fighters. No one. Look at NFL. The Rock is a pretty globally world-renowned athlete, celebrity, influencer. He created the XFL. The XFL's peak viewership in its history was on ABC, I think at 2.3 million. So I think that's like 15% of the average viewership of an NFL game, of a standard NFL game. The Fox broadcast of the Tom Brady flag football, which is something that I think has a lot of legs, flag football as a sport. But they had Tom Brady, 30 other current and former NFL athletes, massive influencers like IShowSpeed, a crossover star in Logan Paul, and they delivered 650,000 viewers on a Fox broadcast television airing. So whether we are the same, slightly below, or slightly above anything UFC has ever done in the US, just that we're in that vicinity is very impressive. Of course, now the onus is on us to show that it's repeatable and can become consistent. But we're not fools. We're not in competition with the 800-pound gorilla that's the UFC. But do we believe there's a path for us to become a relevant player within MMA? Of course.
So this is my honest part about Nikki Sabedarian. I love this particular part right here, what he just shared with us, which is that they're not in competition with the UFC, right? In the same breath as well, they think that they can take a share of the market, so to speak, right? Whether that's 10%, 20%. I mean, I'm sure 1% of the market share is massive.
Let's stay there if we can. I asked you this a million times leading up to it. If it's one and done, or you're going to keep on keeping on with MMA. And you did seem towards the end, as we got closer to fight night, suggest that you're in the MMA business, but also did say that a lot of it hinged on how Saturday night did. And so now, can you definitively say on the Wednesday after the event, MVP is in the MMA business?
100% MVP is in the MMA business. There's a clear opportunity to create an alternative avenue for fighters that truly represents the best of the sport and is fighters first. Our hope is that's with our partners at Netflix, but we've been very fortunate with the outreach we've gotten around what we did and what we accomplished and what we delivered. And we're now looking at all strategic alternatives to implement our strategy.
And so when you say...
So what's interesting here is he's saying that, they're definitely going to go and become a part of the MMA market share, so to speak, and definitely try and develop something there. Now, I think a broader thing real quick, just to kind of, I'm not trying to navigate off of this interview real quick, but one thing I wanted to bring to light that a lot of people are not talking about as well, is I think that when Jake Paul had his feud with Dana White, he brought in the idea of, Dana not paying the fighters properly or not correctly enough, especially at the beginning or mid-level part of their career. Now, with all of that being said, Dana White has decided to go into the boxing era, right? Or sorry, realm. He decided to go into the boxing realm, and I think what's happening is these people are saying like, okay, you know what? He wants to fuck with us in the boxing area or the boxing arena. Let's go fuck with Dana in the MMA arena. And I think that's exactly what Jake Paul's trying to do. Because if you look at Jake Paul, if you look at Dana White, they're both disruptors in their own realm, right? Jake Paul is a disruptor in terms of marketing and the way he can put things together and becoming a boxer himself. And then Dana White is the disruptor of the UFC, right? Then doing the slap promotion, power slap. I'm not a big fan of power slap. But just doing these different things, putting these different things together, different promotions, Zuffa boxing, all that stuff, having the feud with Eddie Hearn, which is also kind of odd to me, especially them being friends prior to that. Like, he is a disruptor of these different businesses, and it's pretty fucking clear that all he wants to do with the UFC, with Zuffa boxing, is turn it into the UFC business model. And he even commented recently and said, why can't we just have all the boxers in Zuffa boxing? And that's what he has right now with the UFC. Now, that being said, I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but recently there's a couple issues. The UFC hasn't been getting the best talent yet recently. And even if they do get the best talent, it's not like the best fight the best anymore, because it's more about the marketing aspect, which I love, right? And a lot of people might disagree with, but as a, slash casual and hardcore fan, that was what brought me into the sport. And then understanding the sport afterwards, it was just, I still like the entertainment aspect of these fighters. And when they have real rivalries, I find it interesting. Like you had the DDP versus Izzy rivalry, right? You had the Ilia Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett, which is kind of squashed at the moment. But I would love to see that fight come up again. If Paddy Pimblett can defeat, right, a BSD, and they want to run that fight, I won't be mad about it. But if you're a hardcore fan and you want the best to fight the best, then you would be mad about that, because that means Arman Sarukin's getting slighted, right? Arman Sarukin's last win, by the way, was Dan Hooker. Prior to that win, it was UFC 300 with Charles Oliveira, which is like 2 years ago. And that's insane. To see that level of competition that he has versus all the other top 5 fighters in the UFC. Now his name's so big, it's just like, I'm going off a different tangent here. Let's get back to it.
That because I read the press release, obviously, and the last line really caught my attention. We are currently reviewing all strategic options to do something very meaningful within MMA on a go-forward basis with a distribution partner like Netflix that shares our vision to create lasting impact, as opposed to with Netflix. And so as of right now, would it be fair to say you don't have that commitment from Netflix to say, hey, we're in this with you guys, we're going to do it for X amount of shows for the next X amount of years?
We haven't even had the discussion yet, to be honest, right? We're long-term partners with Netflix. We've done things that are unimaginable for a company of our size. Paul Tyson is the most streamed sporting event in the history of the world. Paul Tyson is the most viewed boxing event since the days of Muhammad Ali. We then did Taylor Serrano 3 all women's card, most viewed women's MMA or boxing card in history. Jake Joshua, 33 million viewers. And now to do this and set a record in the US, there's obviously great synergies between our organizations. Some people will say, well, sure, it's on Netflix. Of course it's going to do great. I would point them to, 1, Netflix is amazing, 2, greatest platform, but it has to be more than that. Netflix had the season opener for Major League Baseball with the New York Yankees and the Giants. Amazing, big market teams. Look at that viewership. It was great. It was 3 million viewers, similar to what NBC Peacock did that week, and not a record-breaking night at the office, right? So it's not just, hey, put it on Netflix and it does great. There has to be great storytelling. There has to be a compelling product. And I believe our partnership is very unique in its ability to make outstanding things happen.
So that being said, I don't think he's wrong. I also don't think he's right. The issue is that everybody's intrigued, right? Everybody's complaining about the UFC. Like, the audience of MMA want an alternative, right? Like, I think I speak for everybody or a lot of people when I say this, but as much as we all love the UFC, I think a lot of us are frustrated about the UFC and basically the way they've been ran the last couple of years. I would say post 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, these like, I would say actually 2023, 2024, 2025, these years, in my opinion, have been kind of lackluster. And a lot of people would say, oh, this happened and that happened. It did feel to me like there was a lot of fights that got left on the table that should have been taken care of, right? We missed out on Tom Aspinall versus John Jones because John Jones asked for so much money. The UFC obliged and then said, fuck you guys, I don't want to do it, right? So I think it's really hypocritical of him to be able to be like, oh, the MVP is such a great, organization and a great, production compared to the UFC. Like, bro, this is their fucking first event. Shut the fuck up, dude. You just glazing their fucking asshole because you want to slide between their cheeks or whatever. Like, Jesus Christ, man. All right, I'm getting a little bit aggressive here. So it's the boys' energy in me. You know what I'm saying? If you know, you know.
Recognize this is a more fair question to ask to a Netflix executive, but since you are here, what could you tell us about their reaction to the numbers and their interest in MMA going forward?
I think everyone was super excited by how the night unfolded and seeing the engagement of the fans, the excitement of the different finishes that were happening, and the pace of activity throughout the night. So I think we all really enjoyed it. And for me, I hadn't been to an MMA event. As an employee of the UFC, my last event was our first New York event, right? Conor McGregor, Eddie Alvarez. And as a fan, I went to the Conor McGregor Khabib fight. Hadn't been to an MMA event of that scale since. So it was great to sit there and really take it all in. And having been ingrained in boxing now for 4.5 years, reminding myself that close up how different the two sports are in good and bad ways on both sides. And I think on a post-event basis, of course, Netflix is happy. How can you not be, right? To enter a sport with a unknown brand in MVP MMA, bringing back fighters that obviously have equity value, but in many people's eyes, not premium top tier fighters. You know, the question is, if you put the White House card on Netflix, does it do as well as what we did on Saturday night? I don't believe it does, because I think the magic of it was with the names that we had, with the partnership of MVP and Netflix. That's what made it so powerful, and I think they're very happy with the outcome.
Okay, I don't agree with that at all. I completely think that's horseshit, honestly. The UFC White House card would do, in my opinion, a lot better with a global audience on one platform, on Netflix specifically. Paramount doesn't have that feature, doesn't have that global audience. They don't have, for example, the UK. They don't have like all these other people outside the US, basically, right? I don't know if they have it in Canada, but I'm sure they don't. Oh, actually, maybe they do. Sorry, I have to take that back. Actually, I talked to my friend recently, and he said that he watches a lot of those shows that come off on Paramount. So I don't know if Paramount's a part of their, if they have that there or not. But all that to say, I don't think that what he said is true. I even think, for example, on Paramount Plus, being on there and being on CBS, that White House card is still going to get even half of that, or even more than half of that. Now, does it do as good as it did? They did, for example? No. But I think he talks about like these names and, you know, them having the names and having all the substance. Like, we were just as audiences or fans of the UFC or like MMA in general, we just wanted to see what was going to happen, right? We were intrigued by the product itself. We were intrigued by the way they hyped it up and all that stuff as well. However, I will say this, I think they captured a lot more casual audiences than they did for the hardcores. I think a lot of the hardcores probably still watch UFC or did a duo screen between MVP and the UFC, like, which is exactly what I did. If you actually haven't watched this yet, you should definitely check this out. So Colin and I put together a video, and honestly, this was kind of my first time doing something like this behind the scenes. It was basically a BTS, right? Behind the scenes of what, you know, Colin and I were doing during that time. Now, this video hasn't done too well, but you can see here, there's Colin. It's in my place and, you know, my little apartment and stuff like that. And we just go over everything and what we were doing and stuff like that. And I had put a little background music and stuff. So definitely go and watch it and let me know what you guys think. Sorry, I just realized this video got quite a few views. But yeah, all that being said, like, this entire, you know, narrative that Nikisa is trying to provide us is just kind of false altogether. Like, honestly, the reason why they did so well is because of the intrigue. What was it going to be like? Everyone's asking these questions. I didn't get a chance to listen to the commentary booth or like the production part of that side, but I heard through the grapevine that it was pretty shit. And in fact, I heard, I mean, even what's his face, Wyatt on Fight Society. Shout out to Wyatt on Fight Society. Did a video where he talks about Ariel Helwani glazing, like complete glazing MVP, right? And then talking about and critiquing, you know, another, you know, commentator for Zuffa Boxing and suggesting that they're too biased and they're just glazing and glazing and glazing, all while he did the exact same shit. So we all know Ariel's a hypocrite. Again, I'm not a big Ariel Helwani fan. I'm grateful for what he's done in the industry, the fact that he does these interviews like this, so I can go ahead and talk about it. So I'm not trying to be like an asshole, but I just think the dude himself is just weird.
As you know, Netflix is, you know, their thought process when it comes to live sports is they want big events, right? They have the opening day for MLB, Home Run Derby, the Field of Dreams. They're not doing a package of 50-something games. Same with fighting, same with everything that they're doing right now. And so even if MVP MMA continues, and it sounds like it will, it probably can't just continue with Netflix, right? There has to be another player, just like your MVPW events are on ESPN, and prior to that, DAZN as well. And so what could you tell us about your strategy as of right now, as far as how you would divvy this up, how many events per year, etc.?
I would say we're still working on it, but I will say, similar to a WWE that's on Netflix every single week, I think for the right opportunity, the right product, there is the potential to do more than what you're saying. Boxing is more difficult to own than MMA. I say own, obviously UFC is the reference brand. They're going to be the reference brand for many years to come. But there's no true number two player. Boxing, there's 6 or 7 of us putting on premium big events every single week. So do I think that we could come in and take real share within the MMA sphere? Yes. Do I believe that we can convince Netflix to do it on a more regular basis than they've shown to do so with boxing? I think if we have the product and we show them the path of how this can work and set expectations appropriately and ask for the right amount of rights fees that are appropriate for that, my hope is that the answer is yes. But I will say there's Amazon, there's Fox, there's ESPN, there's definitely other outlets that once we present them this whole package and what we've done here, will have interest in what we're doing.
In your opinion, what is that number? How many events would you want to put on?
Ariel's finally asking the right questions.
I think it depends on the partner, right? But if I look at Netflix, I would love to be in a situation to have 12 events a year. 1 per month, effectively, would be the ideal scenario.
To me, I love that. Honestly, I think that's quite interesting. I think if they have the right roster, if they have the right fighters, Jake Paul is really good at storytelling and building these storylines with them. I also like the fact that they're doing the face-to-face in these events. I also like the fact that they're doing the press conferences, not just 1, but 3 altogether, right? Now, I don't know if they're going to be doing the same amount of like effort in promoting the same thing with if they're doing 1 every single month, but I'm sure if they have 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, they're going to be having something going on. Week 1, week 2, week 3, and then the actual fight week as well, right? And that's kind of how, if you look at the way the UFC does their marketing and they do their storytelling, which I actually mirrored a lot of my marketing agency philosophy off of, they basically build that anticipation to the fight. And that's through embedded on a daily basis during fight week. Then you have the weigh-ins, the media day. You have the ceremonial weigh-ins. You have the little, weigh-in show as well sometimes, depending on the event or the fight, or if it's like a UFC numbered event, right? So, / pay-per-view. So yeah, I think the other thing too they have to consider as well is that if people have to buy a subscription, they're going to buy a subscription to either watch, MVP on Netflix or have a Paramount. I think there's going to be a time in the future that comes up where people are going to try and decide which one they want versus having both of them. I think also as well, depending on where the PFL goes after this, and I know I'm not trying to like glaze the PFL or anything, I just think what they're doing currently with Johnny Eblen, Castillo Vancinas, I think it's awesome. I think their whole product right now is just way more improved than it was the previous years. Their pacing's a lot better, so I think they have potential to still do well. But then you have like Scott Coker, who I talked about earlier, coming into the coming to the MMA limelight, right? So that's going to be interesting. Let's go ahead and watch the interview and let's finish this off soon.
Do you feel like there are enough big names, stars, draws to put on that many events?
I mean, is there enough big names, stars, draws to put on 42 UFC events?
The thing with his answer there is he's right. Like, the UFC recently has become kind of odd in my opinion. So when I started this channel, I actually wanted to start like 3 or 4 years ago. Now, if you visited my channel before, if you are a regular viewer, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if this story is completely new to you, then you know that I wanted to start, or you don't know, but I'm telling you now. I wanted to start this a couple years ago, and I just didn't because I was like, I don't know, whatever, the case is. That being said, I used to want to start it because I used to realize, like on these fight night cards, on these UFC pay-per-view cards, I would get super excited. I'm like, oh my God, I know this fighter and I know that fighter and I know these people are going up and against each other, and I can actually create like content on these fighters and talk about like their fight style and maybe what might happen, what might not happen, the storylines between the fighters and stuff like that. I actually like Mo because he's very analytical, and I like in terms of the fighting styles, and I love Colin for his perspective just based off of what he enjoys, and how he sometimes we have the same perspective on stuff and sometimes we don't, but it's kind of cool to have his perspective as well. In the same breath, it's just like I was super excited for this whole thing, and I just wanted a co-host. I wanted someone to be able to do the video or the channels with and not have to be on my own. But I love responding to these videos. Like these solo videos I actually really, really enjoy. In fact, speaking of that, we did just surpass 100 subscribers, and I just wanted to say real quick, guys, to you that we are planning to do an episode specifically for that, which is why I've also been off for a little bit because I've been doing some research. Now, it's going to be on the top 5 X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to talk about very specific categories that no one else is talking about on these channels, or UFC channels, or MMA channels. We're going to be going over, like, I'll just give you one quick example. Top 5 gatekeepers of all time. Who are your top 5 gatekeepers of all time? That's one of the topics. That being said, it's just a little bit to tease you guys into what's going to be coming up, but let's get back into it.
I'm asking the questions here, Nikisa, all right?
I know, but
the UFC is the
like,
brand. The UFC
every event isn't going to be Rousey-Carano, but it's about having a consistent base that delivers a certain viewership number, right? The WWE delivers 2.5 million views on Netflix every single week, pretty consistently. What can we do that delivers a consistent level of ratings that is appropriate for the investment that your distribution partner is making? That's kind of the math that we have to figure out collectively with our distribution partner.
As I said at the top, a lot of people nitpicking everything. And I think to a degree, this is all expected and healthy. This is what happens when someone comes into the space that is new. One of the things that was brought up was the matchmaking. These were one-sided fights. These were squash matches, if you will. What is your response to the criticism of the matchmaking?
I'll say there were some great fights on the card that didn't last one round. I will say that when you have extraordinary talents coming into the cage, that unbelievable things can happen. Of course, the Ronda Gina.
Okay, who the fuck was extraordinary, guys? Like, let's be real. It's not Francis Ngannou. It's not Ronda Rousey. Definitely not Mike Perry, although I love fucking Mike Perry.
Outcome for me was...
Sorry, that came off wrong. Pause. I enjoy Mike Perry as a talent.
Very expected, right? That's what Ronda Rousey does. Now, that I think that Gina Carano could, do something that would negate that? Absolutely. There's a former MMA fighter who never, what's Matt Brown? Mm-hmm. Matt Brown was going into this fight saying a lot of negative things, but was very clear that Gina Carano was going to win. Post-fight, very clear that it was all a hoax and we were sold, and Ronda Rousey was always going to do this. I have messages from Vitor Belfort, from Karate Hottie, from Dan Henderson. We've put them up saying Gina Carano was going to win. There was many within the MMA community that thought Gina was going to win. Ronda just did what she's best at doing and implemented it and did it in 17 seconds, and we got 17 million viewers. In terms of the Nate and Mike fight, I think we all were surprised it stopped when it did, and I would love to see that rematch. Francis against Philippe Lins.
I don't want to see a rematch.
Was that one-sided? No, I thought it was a tough battle for Philippe, and I thought he hung in there. And Francis caught him with a perfect shot to the top of the head that resulted in that knockout. But I thought he performed very well.
He did perform.
And then I look at the other two main fights on the card: Saladin versus Ken Cross. Saladin's a special talent, and with JDS versus Big Boy Robles. That fight could have ended that way either way. It was about who caught who first, and Robles caught JDS.
JDS should have done some grappling. I feel like he's proving the point that these were completely extremely one-sided fights. And Matt Brown, I saw Matt Brown say, he's the one I was referencing actually earlier in this video, that Ronda Rousey does need some fucking therapy, man. Like genuinely needs some fucking therapy. She just not my cup of tea, honestly. Now, that being said, let's get back into the interview itself.
Mike Perry tweeted, they're really talking about this rematch, and I'm assuming the they is you guys. And so what could you tell us about these quote-unquote talks?
I think their respective teams have gotten aligned that they would like to do it.
It shouldn't
I
happen.
think from our perspective, we think that's a great headline event. We haven't advanced the ball more than that. I think
Not a
Nate needs a
great
little bit of time to recover, and then we'll get together and figure out what's the right strategy. But I think they both deserve that rematch. I don't think Mike wanted the fight to end that way.
I mean, Nate Diaz allegedly shit his pants, right? So, according to MMA Guru. So, if he allegedly shit his pants, you think he wants a rematch? Like, he's going to say yeah because he's a dog. But yeah.
Has anyone been signed post Saturday? Are there any fighters under contract with MVP MMA as of right now?
No, but Namo Fazil seems to be under contract with UFC post Saturday.
So what do you make of that? Because I thought he was one of the stars of the week, I'll be honest. Like, press conference, he was incredible. Fight was incredible. Even the thing with
I thought he was a little over the top at the press conference. Like, parts were great, but parts were way too drawn out.
Sure.
But he obviously is a charismatic guy, and to his team's credit, they told us he was that, and I believed them, and that's why I ended up moving them to the main of the prelims. He delivered. Jake Babian delivered. And what I thought was remarkable was how calm Namo was in that first round when he was obviously potentially in trouble with Jake on his back, but he never got nervous, right? Never got out of sorts and fought his way out in the second round. So I make of it that, listen, this guy obviously deserves a great opportunity, and if he wants to go to the UFC, we fully support that. But chase your dreams, make it happen.
That was actually a really fun fight to watch. In fact, I thought Nama Fazil did a really good job of pissing Jake Babian off to the point where he just became too emotional in that fight and decided to fucking go like he was Daniel Santos against Dooho Choi, right? But that was the one fight that was like that. And that was like, it ended pretty quickly after the second round started. So yeah, I'm going to go into the next part of this portion of this video. Earlier today, when you guys joined me, I said I want to talk about specifically 329 with McGregor's return and with Max Holloway's fight against this upcoming fighter. Now, we do have this weekend Alexander Usyk versus Rico Verhoeven, so I do think I want to talk about that as well eventually, but not now. I want to just go specifically into my early predictions about this main event, which is UFC 329. That entire fight card, by the way, is actually stacked to the T. I really am excited about that fight, or that fight card. Okay, so we got McGregor versus Holloway 2. Max Holloway has fought recently against Charles Oliveira on the BMF title fight. And the last fight that we saw Conor McGregor in was the fight that I first went to, my first UFC event, UFC 264. I only remember that because it's on my t-shirt. Okay, so that being said, we saw the way that ended with McGregor, right? He breaks his ankle, he steps back with Dustin Poirier, breaks his fucking ankle, okay? And then sticks to the stick, as Chael Sonnen would say it, where he's just like saying, your wife's in me DMs to Poirier. So, it's a 22-6 record he's got. Max Holloway has a 27-9 record. When they first met, it was mostly a grappling match, right? Between McGregor and Holloway. McGregor being the aggressor, and Holloway kind of just trying to defend those takedowns and stuff like that. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this doesn't feel the same energy like it normally does. I don't know if it's because we've been waiting for McGregor to return to the UFC for so long, and we've been teased so long about this return that it's finally happening. None of us actually give a crap about it. But I'm not going to say I'm very excited for this fight. I'm just going to say this. I'm excited to see what McGregor we get back, but I'm also scared to see sort of what kind of McGregor we get back, because at the end of the day, whether you like to admit it or not, McGregor has just suffered one of the biggest injuries of his life, right? Getting the TKO knockout from Dustin Poirier with his entire ankle shattered, and he has a titanium plate, I believe it is, in his ankle. So I'm gonna go ahead and shift us over to the Tapology, which has a lot of fucking ads. Fucking annoying. Going into it, we got the fighter details here, right? We got Jerome, Max, Kelly, Holloway. Nickname's Blessed. Current MMA streak is 1 loss, okay? He's got a 27-9 pro record. He's age 34, born in December of 1991. Last weigh-in was at 155. Okay, let's go into this. So he's got 12 wins by KO and 1 loss by KO, which is obviously Ilia Topuria. 2 wins by submission with 1 loss by submission, which is to Dustin Poirier, the loss. 13 wins by decision, 7 losses by decision. A lot of those are Alexander Volkanovski. Now he's 23-9 within the UFC, and X1 world events, 3-3-0. Okay. Now I don't think any of you care that much about all this stuff in terms of these details, but what's going to be very interesting to see right now is his record, right? His professional bout. So he's got the upcoming bout against McGregor, which is July 11th of 2026. He lost to Charles Oliveira, the BMF title fight. He won against Dustin Poirier, or defended his belt, his BMF belt, against Dustin Poirier, to Dustin's basically retirement. He lost the title fight against Ilia Topuria. He wins the title fight for the BMF title at UFC 300 with Justin Gaethje at 4 minutes and 59 seconds of round 5 with an overhand right. That was one of the most significant fights I've ever seen from Max Holloway. That was the best I've ever seen him look. And prior to that, he fought the Korean Zombie, and he sort of got a right hook knockout as well. And then he fought Arnold Allen, who I thought Arnold Allen before this fight was going to win, because Arnold Allen at that point was undefeated, and he took his O away. Then he lost to, obviously, Volkanovski. He wins against Yair, wins against Calvin Kattar, which was a phenomenal fucking fight. Loses against Alexander and Alexander again. And then that's where he lost his belt, right? The first Alexander Volkanovski fight back in 2019 of December. And honestly, since I've been a fan, it's been the Volkanovski era, apart from when Volkanovski lost the title to Ilia Topuria. Up until that point, I mean, that Brian Ortega fight that Alexander Volkanovski had against Brian Ortega, that was one of my favorite fights. Okay, enough about him. So now we got his record in play. We want to go over and check out Conor McGregor's record. So Conor McGregor, 37 years old, born in July 14th. So that's 3 days after his birthday. So he's going to be 38 when he has this fight as well, which is interesting. He's on a 2-loss win streak, right? Or 2-loss streak, sorry. Let's go into his wins. Okay, so he's got 19 wins by KO and 2 losses by KO TKO. He's got 1 submission win and 4 losses by submission. And he's got 2 decision wins and 0 losses by decision. Okay, so this fight is most likely not going to last the entire 5 rounds. And I think if anybody heard this, I heard Conor McGregor was asking for like 3 rounds, not 5. But for the main event, it's kind of like he's a victim of his own success in this particular case, right? Now we're going into his territory of his actual like portfolio. Okay. He's got the confirmed bout against Max Holloway. The canceled bout against Michael Chandler was back in 2024, June 29th. That's where he stubbed his pinky toe. And we all saw how that happened. And then this is the one that I went to, which is UFC 264, Poirier versus McGregor 3. And then obviously he loses to Dustin prior to that, which was UFC 257. Okay? And then this is January of 2021. This is July of 2021. And then you have the head kick and punches KO in round 1 to Donald Cerrone. This is 2020. This is right around the time I became a fan. And obviously I watched this fight as well. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus McGregor with a rear naked choke. Khabib won. And then he also loses to Floyd Mayweather, which, to be fair, it's not in his arsenal. So, I mean, it's in his arsenal, but meaning like, you know, Floyd is one of the best, right? He wins to Eddie Alvarez, wins to Nate Diaz by majority decision, loses to Nate Diaz, wins against Jose Aldo, wins against Chad Mendez, Dennis Silver, and Dustin Poirier. Now, these fights are back in 2014. So this is literally over a decade ago that we saw that McGregor. Okay? That being said, I just don't know how to really predict this fight because it's really difficult. Like, do we see the McGregor of old? And is it because, Max Holloway's literally got knocked down in the UFC 300 fight against Justin Gaethje. He got knocked down against Ilia Topuria. In fact, he got knocked out against Ilia Topuria. He gets knocked down in his last fight against Dustin Poirier, his fight before that. And against Charles Oliveira, he looked terrible, honestly. Charles Oliveira, when he let his hands go against Max Holloway, looked like the better striker in my opinion. Now, obviously, that's before the takedown happened. When I watched that first round back between Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway, which is not a great fight to watch altogether, but just the beginning part of it, it is so insane to see how bad Max was taking those shots. Like, he almost looked like he went against the fence, and he looked almost like frightened, like, what the fuck is going on? Because in his mind, and in all our minds, when it comes to the hands, when it comes to the stand-up battle, that's fucking Max Holloway's realm, okay? And you got Charles Oliveira, who's a grappler, who's out striking him, and is in fact, like, punishing him with, like, hard-ass strikes. And I think it kind of goes back to what Justin Gaethje said. Justin Gaethje said one of the hardest punchers was Charles Oliveira in their title fight against each other, where Charles actually loses the title, right? He weighs in over the weight limit of 155. I think he was 155 and a half, loses his belt, which is what they should have done to Chimaev when he, missed weight, so to speak, or allegedly missed weight. But yeah, like, that is crazy to me, guys, that happened. So now you get to see it. My final prediction right now, early prediction for this fight right now with McGregor versus Max Holloway. My mind's telling me Max Holloway is going to somehow win this fight unless McGregor can put him down. But if McGregor can't put him down, he's going to gas out and Holloway's going to win this fight. And Holloway is going to be interesting to see at 170 with his gas tank. Can he have the same speed? Can he have the same gas tank that he has at 145 or 155? Like, at 155, he looks really good, except for that last fight. He didn't look that good. But the one against Justin Gaethje at UFC 300 is when he, in my opinion, looked the most full and really, really good in that fight. Like, if you look at his quads, his hamstrings and everything in that UFC 300 fight against Justin Gaethje, that's, in my opinion, when he looked the best. He didn't look really good in the last couple of fights where he fought against Dustin Poirier. He actually looked a little bit like in the Dustin Poirier fight and in the fight with Charles Oliveira, he looked like he actually was a little bit, he lacked muscle density, so to speak. That I guess that's the best way to say it. So guys, if you haven't liked already, please like the video. If you haven't subscribed already, please give us a subscribe. We're trying to get to 200 subscribers now. That's the next goal that we have. And in fact, we're going to be doing an episode about the 100 subscribers that we got recently, talking about top 5 categories. So yeah, it's going to be Colin and I. Hopefully I'm going to try and get Mo on it if he can join us. But for the most part, it'll be Colin and I. So please, thank you for all your support. Thank you for everything, guys. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you on the other side. Cheers.